I'm not someone who believes in paranormal stuff or conspiracy theories or anything like that. I grew up around forests and spent most weekends hiking or camping, so being out in the woods has always been normal for me. That's why what happened that night stuck with me so much. It started when I decided to go on a short solo camping trip in a wooded area about 2 hours away from where I live. It's a pretty quiet place, not an official campground, but a known hiking spot where people sometimes set up tents if they stay off the main trails. I arrived around late afternoon, hiked about a mile in, and set up a small tent near a creek. It was completely normal. I cooked some instant noodles, listened to the water running over the rocks, and watched the sun go down through the trees. Around 9 p.m., I was sitting by my small campfire when I heard what sounded like footsteps somewhere deeper in the woods. That alone didn't bother me because other hikers sometimes pass through late and animals make similar sounds. But what made me notice was how slow and deliberate the steps sounded. Not like someone walking normally, it was more like someone taking one step, stopping, then another step a few seconds later. I turned my flashlight toward the direction of the sound and called out, thinking maybe another camper was nearby. I said something like, "Hey, you good over there?" No answer. The footsteps stopped immediately after I spoke. I stood there for a minute listening, expecting whoever it was to respond or keep moving. Nothing happened. The woods went completely quiet in that weird way where you suddenly notice there are no insects or rustling leaves. After a while, I just assumed someone had changed direction, or maybe it really was an animal moving through the brush. I put the fire out and went into my tent around 10:30. The weird part started about an hour later. I woke up to the sound of something walking slowly around my campsite, not crashing through the bushes like a deer, actual steps, circling. I could hear leaves crunching and small sticks snapping one at a time. It moved around my tent once, then stopped near the entrance. I froze and listened. I expected breathing or at least movement, but there was just silence. After maybe 30 seconds, the steps started again, moving away into the trees. I waited another 10 minutes before unzipping the tent and shining my flashlight around. The campsite was empty. But in the dirt near the edge of the fire pit were footprints. They looked like normal shoe prints, not boots or hiking shoes, more like flat sneakers. The strange thing was there was only one set of tracks, and they stopped about 10 feet from my tent. After that, the ground was undisturbed, like whoever made them just disappeared into thin air.
Whenever I force myself to sleep, there's this instinct of mine that is hindering me. I supposed it was my survival instinct acting upon me after hearing those weird noises. I stayed inside the tent with my flashlight on, listening to every small sound outside. Nothing else happened for the rest of the night. No footsteps, no movement, just the usual forest noise slowly coming back. Around sunrise, I finally stepped outside to look at the ground again. The footprints were still there, clear as before, but the strange part was that they still ended in the same place, no tracks leading away. The soil around them was soft enough that even small animals left marks, but beyond those last prints, the ground looked untouched. I tried to think of a normal explanation. Maybe I missed the rest of the tracks in the dark. Maybe someone stepped on rocks or roots where the ground didn't hold prints. But even then, the direction didn't make sense. The prints faced directly toward my tent, like the person had walked up, stopped, and stood there for a while. I packed my gear faster than usual that morning. Before leaving, I walked a few yards into the trees where the footsteps had come from the night before. The forest floor was thick with leaves, but there were no signs that someone had walked through there recently. No broken branches, no crushed plants, just normal forest. The hike back to the trailhead was quiet. I didn't see anyone on the path the entire time, which was strange because the place is usually at least a little busy on weekends. I almost forgot about the whole thing over the next couple of days. Work got busy and I pushed the memory aside. Then, something odd happened. 2 nights after the trip, I was going through the photos on my phone. I had taken a few pictures of the creek and my campsite before it got dark. In one of the photos, something caught my eye. It was taken around sunset, maybe an hour before I first heard the footsteps. In the background, between two trees about 30 feet behind my tent, there was a shape that I hadn't noticed before. At first, I thought it was just a shadow or a tree trunk, but when I zoomed in, it looked more like a person standing there. The figure was tall and thin, mostly hidden by the trees, but you could clearly see the outline of a head and shoulders. What made my stomach drop was the angle. The figure wasn't facing the camera, it was facing my tent. I checked the photo details again. The timestamp showed it was taken almost an hour before I heard those slow footsteps in the woods.
I've spent most of my life around forests because my uncle owns a small hunting cabin deep in the woods. My cousins and I used to visit it every fall, mostly to hike, fish, and just get away from the city for a few days. The cabin itself is pretty old but solid, built sometime in the early 80s, according to my uncle. It sits about 2 miles off the nearest dirt road, surrounded by thick trees in every direction. No cell signal, no nearby houses, just woods. Last October, I went up there alone for the first time. My uncle had given me the key and said I could use the place whenever I wanted. I arrived around sunset after the long drive and the short hike to the cabin. Everything looked exactly how I remembered it. The same wooden porch, the same rusted lantern hanging by the door, and the same quiet feeling the forest always had out there. I was doing just fine, just like what a lonely person would do. I made a fire in the wood stove, cooked some canned food, and listened to the wind pushing through the trees outside. Around midnight, I decided to step out onto the porch for a bit. The sky was clear, and the moon was bright enough that you could see the clearing in front of the cabin without a flashlight. That's when I noticed something strange. At the edge of the tree line, maybe 40 or 50 feet away, there was a tall shape standing between the trees. At first, I assumed it was just a tree stump or some weird shadow from the moonlight, but the more I looked at it, the more it seemed like it didn't belong there. The shape looked too straight, too narrow. I grabbed my flashlight from inside the cabin and shined it toward the spot. Nothing was there, just trees and bushes. I stood there for another minute, trying to convince myself my eyes had just played a trick on me. The woods at night can do that sometimes. Shadows move in strange ways when the wind shifts the branches. So I went back inside and locked the door. About 20 minutes later, while sitting at the small kitchen table, I heard something outside on the porch. Not loud, just a single step on the wooden boards. The porch creaked slightly, the way it does when someone walks across it. I froze and listened. Then came another slow step, and another. Someone was walking across the porch toward the front door. The problem was, the cabin only has one trail leading to it, and I hadn't seen or heard anyone hiking up during the entire evening. I didn't move when I heard those steps on the porch. I just sat there at the table, staring at the door, trying to convince myself it was something normal. Maybe the wood was shifting from the cold. Maybe an animal had somehow climbed up. But deep down, I knew what footsteps sounded like, and that was exactly what I was hearing. Slow, careful, like someone trying not to make noise. The steps stopped right in front of the door. Then came a soft knock, not loud, just 3 light taps. I didn't answer. A few seconds passed, and then I heard something that made my chest tighten. The doorknob moved slightly, like someone was testing it. It didn't open because I had locked it earlier, but whoever was outside didn't try to force it. They just stopped again, completely still. I stayed frozen for what felt like forever, barely even breathing. After maybe a full minute, I heard the steps again, this time moving away from the door and across the porch. Then silence. I waited for a few minutes before I finally got up. I grabbed my flashlight and walked slowly toward the door. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there, listening. Nothing. When I finally unlocked it and pulled it open, the porch was empty. No one there.
The ground below the porch was soft dirt, and I immediately looked for footprints. There were none, not a single mark, not even from earlier. It was like no one had walked there at all. I stepped out and shined the flashlight toward the tree line again. It's just trees and shadows. Then the beam landed on something that made my stomach drop. About the same distance as before, between two trees, I saw that same tall shape again. This time I didn't look away. I kept the light on it. For a second, it looked like a person standing completely still. No movement, no reaction to the light, just watching. Then, slowly, it stepped sideways behind one of the trees and disappeared. I ran back inside and locked the door. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every small noise made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I heard the porch creak again. Not walking this time, just a single long creak, like weight being placed on one spot and held there. I didn't check. When morning came, I packed everything as fast as I could and left. As I was walking back toward the trail, I turned around one last time to look at the cabin. The front door was open. I know for a fact I locked it before leaving.
I don't know if this really counts as anything serious, but it's something I've never been able to explain, and it still bothers me whenever I think about it. This happened in broad daylight, which honestly makes it worse. I was hiking alone on a trail I've used a few times before, nothing remote or dangerous, just a quiet wooded path about an hour from my town. It was around early afternoon, maybe 1 or 2 p.m., and the weather was clear. At first, everything felt normal. I could hear birds, wind moving through the leaves, and the occasional crack of branches from small animals. About halfway into the trail, things started to feel off. The forest didn't go silent exactly, but the sounds became uneven, like everything around me wasn't happening at the same time anymore. I remember hearing a single loud crack to my right, like someone stepping hard on a dry branch, but when I stopped and looked, there was nothing. No movement, no animals, nothing that could have caused it. I stood still for a bit, thinking maybe I'd catch whatever made the noise moving away, but the woods just stayed quiet. When I started walking again, it happened a second time, this time to my left, closer than before. Same kind of sound, heavy and deliberate. I turned quickly, expecting to see a deer or at least something moving through the trees, but again, nothing. No rustling, no follow-up sound, just complete stillness. At that point, I started paying closer attention. Every few steps, I'd hear something else, a low, shifting sound behind me, like leaves being pressed down, but when I turned around, the ground looked untouched. Once I clearly heard what sounded like 2 quick steps directly behind me, close enough that I felt it should have been right there, but there was nothing when I looked. I even stepped off the trail a bit to check the ground, thinking maybe I'd see footprints or disturbed leaves, but everything looked normal, like no one had walked there at all. The weirdest part was that the sounds never overlapped with each other. It was always one noise, then silence, then another noise from a different direction, almost like something was moving around me, but choosing when to be heard. I never saw anything, not even a shadow or movement between the trees. It just kept happening until I finally turned back and headed toward the trail exit. The closer I got to the parking area, the more the normal forest sounds came back, like birds and insects, and the strange noises stopped completely. I haven't gone back to that trail since, not because I think something was chasing me or anything like that, but because I can't shake the feeling that whatever was making those sounds knew exactly where I was the whole time, even though I could never see it.
I thought that would be the end of it once I left the trail, and for a while it was. I got back to my car, drove home, and tried to brush it off as just nerves or maybe my senses being off that day. But later that night, I started thinking about how consistent the sounds were. They didn't feel random. It was like they were reacting to me, keeping a certain distance, never too close, never too far. A few days later, I decided to go through the short clips I had recorded on my phone earlier that afternoon. I sometimes record parts of my hikes just for memories, nothing serious. Most of the clips were normal, trees, sunlight through branches, me walking along the trail. But in one of the videos, something didn't match what I remembered. It was a clip I recorded just before I turned back. You can clearly hear me walking, and then there's a sharp crack of a branch somewhere off to the side. I remember that sound. It was one of the moments that made me stop. But when I paused the video and looked closely, the direction didn't make sense. The sound came from my right, but in the frame, the trees on that side didn't move at all. No leaves shifting, no branches bouncing back, nothing that would match the noise. I thought maybe it was just the microphone picking up sound differently, until I kept watching. About 2 seconds after the crack, there's another noise, softer, like something stepping on leaves behind me. I don't react to it in the video, I just keep walking like I didn't hear it, but I know for a fact I would have turned around if I had heard something that close. I replayed it over and over, trying to see if I missed something visually, but there was nothing. No shadow, no movement, just the sound. Then I checked the timestamp of the video. It was taken just minutes before I decided to leave the trail. That's when I noticed something else that didn't make sense. The time didn't line up with when I remember recording it. It was off by almost 20 minutes. I thought it was just my phone glitching, but the rest of the clips from that day were all correct. Only that one video was wrong. I haven't gone back to that trail, and I don't think I will. What bothers me now isn't just the noises I heard, but the part where, in that video, something was close enough to be picked up clearly on audio, and I didn't react to it at all. It makes me wonder if there were moments out there where I wasn't fully aware of what was happening around me, or worse, if something was close enough to follow me without ever being seen, and only chose to be heard when it wanted to.
My dog and I usually go out to the woods behind our neighborhood in the afternoons. It's not deep forest, but it stretches far enough that you can walk for an hour without seeing anyone. My dog, Max, loves it out there. He's a pretty calm dog overall, but the moment we get near the trail, he gets excited and pulls ahead like he knows exactly where he wants to go. That day was no different at first. It was late afternoon, close to sunset, the kind of time when the light starts turning orange and everything feels quieter. We'd been walking for maybe 20 minutes when I noticed Max slowing down. That's unusual for him. He's usually the one dragging me forward, but this time he stopped completely and just stood there, ears up, staring into the trees to our right. I followed his gaze but didn't see anything. No movement, no animals, nothing that stood out. I called his name and tried to get him moving again, but he didn't respond right away. He just kept staring, stiff, like he was focused on something I couldn't see. After a few seconds, he let out a low growl, something I'd never heard from him before. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just quiet and steady. That was enough to make me feel uneasy. I figured maybe there was a deer or something hidden in the brush, so I gently pulled on his leash to keep going. He followed, but he kept looking back over his shoulder every few steps. The deeper we went, the quieter the woods got. I didn't notice it right away, but eventually I realized there were no birds, no insects, nothing, just our footsteps on the dirt path. About 10 minutes later, Max suddenly pulled hard to the left, off the trail. I almost lost my grip on the leash. He wasn't acting scared exactly, more like he was trying to get to something. Curious, I let him lead for a bit. We pushed through some low branches and ended up in a small clearing I had never seen before. In the middle of it was an old cabin. It looked abandoned, the wood faded and worn, windows dark, and part of the roof slightly collapsed. I was surprised because I'd been coming to these woods for a while and never came across it before. Max stopped again as soon as we reached the edge of the clearing. This time he didn't growl, he just stood there, completely still, staring straight at the cabin. His tail was down, and he refused to move forward. I tried to encourage him, thinking maybe he was just nervous about the unfamiliar place, but he dug his paws into the ground and wouldn't budge. Then I noticed something about the cabin that didn't sit right. The front door was slightly open, just enough to leave a dark gap, like someone had left it that way. As I stood there looking at it, I had this strange feeling that whatever Max had sensed earlier wasn't back in the woods anymore. It was inside that cabin.
My heart was screaming at me to turn around the moment Max refused to move, but curiosity got the better of me. I thought it was just an old cabin, probably left behind years ago, and that the open door was just from wind or rot. Still, the closer I got to the clearing, the more uneasy I felt. Max stayed behind me, low and tense, like he didn't want to be there but didn't want to leave me either. I took a few steps toward the cabin and called out, just in case someone was inside. No response, just silence, the kind that feels heavy. The ground around the cabin was mostly dirt, with patches of dead grass, and that's when I noticed something strange. There were footprints. Not fresh exactly, but clear enough to see. The odd part was they all seemed to lead toward the cabin. I didn't see any coming away from it. I stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it, then moved a little closer. The door creaked slightly as the wind shifted, opening just a bit wider. I couldn't see much inside, just darkness and what looked like old furniture. Max let out another low sound behind me, sharper this time, almost like a warning. I turned to check on him, and he was staring past me, not at the cabin, but at the trees on the other side of the clearing. I followed his gaze and felt that same uneasy feeling from earlier come back, stronger. The trees were still, but something about them felt wrong, like there was movement just out of sight. I turned back toward the cabin, and for a second I thought I saw something shift inside. Not clearly, just a slight change in the darkness, like something had moved deeper in the room. I stepped back without thinking. At the same time, Max pulled hard on the leash, trying to get us away from the clearing. That's when I heard it, a slow step from inside the cabin, heavy, like someone shifting their weight on old wood. I didn't wait to confirm it. I turned and walked quickly back the way we came, Max now pulling ahead instead of resisting. We didn't stop until we reached the main trail. The moment we stepped back onto it, the normal sounds of the woods came back, like nothing had happened. I didn't look back at the cabin, not even once. Later that night, I tried to look up if anyone knew about an old cabin in those woods, but I couldn't find anything. No mention of it on maps or forums. What stuck with me wasn't just what I saw, but how Max acted. He's never reacted like that before or since. Even now, when we go near that trail, he refuses to go in. He just stops at the entrance and waits, like he knows exactly where that path leads and has no intention of going back.